Hi, welcome to Storytime with Dave Booker. Appreciate you being here. Look forward to reading this one. We're reading from book four of The Sheriff in a Small Town. And today we are reading one of my favorite chapters. It's kind of a flavor of Garrison Keillor about this one, I think. So Tucker and Prince were at the courthouse being groomed and trimmed. On each was a leather aerial helmet with goggles and a long white scarf. Talbot was out back and washing Joe's motorcycle, decking it out as fancy as he could. On the back, he had a platform that the dogs would sit on. All this was in preparation for the Founders' Day parade, and Joe and the dogs were the lead attractions. Several other folks who had motorcycles were also going to follow behind. A number of the cyclists were small, so they would follow in a V formation down the street. Behind them would be Mayor Rocky Stone, dressed as Zedediah Horton and his family in period costumes. Rocky would be riding horse, and Agnes and Mary would follow along in a small cart. Don Newsom had brought in one of his Clydesdale horses for Talbot to ride, dressed as a sheriff of the 1800s. Michaela and Larry were riding behind him. Everyone else in the parade was wearing appropriate handmade costumes. The band had swapped out their normal instruments for wooden pipes for melody and large wood-shelled snare drums for signals. Brasses were reduced in number to bugles and a few French horns. Motorcycles roared into life. The band began playing The Conquering Hero Comes, and the whole parade proceeded around town, ending at Sentinel Field. Rocky climbed laboriously up the bandstand stairs as an old man and sat in a rocking chair. He read from a script prepared by the Historical Society that spoke of the building of the town in Zedediah and its growth to the present. Rocky had revised the speech with Talbot and Joe to add humor to an otherwise pretty dull history lesson. After one very complimentary lecture on the early building of the town, Rocky asked if any town was built with such compassion and ingenuity that it became a paragon of virtue. Talbot, in the character of early law enforcement, yelled out, "Now let's just hold on a second. Let's set the record straight." Talbot climbed on stage carrying an old folding chair, and the men sat to debate the issue. He spoke of the past sheriffs who had dealt with some pretty unsavory aspects of the town's history, which Rocky hastily tried to downplay. Their back and forth banter had the audience laughing and brought out the good and bad in such a way as to balance the scales and ensure that even though had been times when things were not always at their best, the town survived to reclaim their heritage and strive to be the good place and people the town was known for. In conclusion, Rocky declared the festival open and folks wandered around, gaining insight into the crafts and businesses that had built the town. Dead center was the main attraction. A large mock-up of Fort Sentinel and the recreation of the whiskey battle. The fort had been constructed with wooden posts that slid open to allow for the action inside to be seen by those watching outside. The history being portrayed is this. Soon after the fort had been built in 1775, it was manned with a local militia. 2 months later, it was attacked by the British. According to the legend, Captain Robert Olson had forgotten to lock the back door. While the fort had been engaged by the enemy from the front, a small patrol skirted the walls and, finding the back door accessible, entered and took command. The Americans, finding themselves outmaneuvered, accepted defeat graciously and asked the soldiers to join them in commemorating their victory with a glass of whiskey. Soldiers outside were also invited in to join the celebration, at which the British were soundly drunk under the table. The British were stripped of their weapons and supplies, taken outside and left to recover in the morning. The following day, the British had massive hangovers and had lost everything but their uniforms. Dejected and with aching heads, they departed. The fort was never attacked again. By the fifth reenactment, it was becoming apparent that the drinks were real and that both sides were now celebrating to the point that the sixth reenactment was a complete shambles. Peggy was over with several cows. With their milk and cream, she was demonstrating milking, making it into butter and soft cheese. As she churned, she spoke on all the duties a woman was obliged to do, whether wife, daughter, mother, or spinster. Beside her, Josh discussed the labor of the man, whether husband, son, father, or bachelor. Together, they painted a picture of hard life, of almost constant toil and worry as they scratched survival out of the soil and tried to raise a family that would be in better circumstances than themselves. Agnes was sitting on a blanket with Mary beside her and weaving small baskets. As she worked, she discussed how a larger basket was made in much the same way. Larger baskets, she explained, use slits of wood, usually white oak, which was and is abundant in this area. She took a block of oak and using a knife made thin sheets. These were woven together and shaped to form a large and sturdy basket. She passed out thin sheets half an inch wide for people to weave. Kayla was demonstrating candle making and was selling some of the ones she had already created with molds and by dipping. She had a small pot of beeswax boiling away and was filtering it over and over to remove the impurities. Next to her, Talbot was explaining simple furnishings. They're showing how a bed used rope under the mattress. Over time, the ropes would stretch and loosen. Someone in the family would have to use a long pole and tighten the ropes again. Now you know where saying sleep tight comes from. Nancy Gilbertson was sitting with a stack of cigar boxes collected from 5 counties. With them were stacks of slats that she was attaching to the boxes and drilling holes. Stringing them, she plucked out a tune. She had groups sitting around trading cigar box guitars and doing their best to strum out a tune. Her husband, Ted, had stacks of bamboo and various lengths that they tied together to create flutes. Rocky meandered around, making mental notes on which areas were packing them in and which were bereft of visitors. All in all, the Founders Day Festival is becoming better organized with better exhibits and more history. One thing Talbot had added with Joe's assistance in the fort was a makeshift stockade where he put any disruptors. You even became disruptors just to have the experience of being put in the stockades. He'd leave them inside for an hour or two to cool off, then release them. Rocky saw all the people creating musical instruments and decided at the end of the evening would be a free-form concert on ancient instruments. Using a speaking trumpet, he announced that at 7 o'clock that evening, anyone in it or any group that wanted to perform was welcome to the stage. People paused mid-stride and then gathered together to form groups and began to practice. At 7, Rocky mounted the bandstand and asked if anyone was ready. He was immediately surrounded. Asking them to line up, he began the recital. As each group came on stage, they would let him know what tune they would play. He would announce it, and they would give their rendition with varying degrees of success. As the evening fell, everyone decided it was time to go home. They packed up their wares or demonstrations and carted them to their cars. Rocky and Talbot, and Joe and Josh, along with their families, stayed to assist any who needed it. By 10 o'clock, the field was clear, save for the fort. Joe rushed over and removed the door of the fort and the stockade. He had a fear of some kid getting locked inside and nobody knowing. The Civic Council wanted to keep the fort and would tear it down in pieces in the morning should it ever be needed again. Morgan sauntered over and congratulated Josh on the success of the Founders Day improvements. It was the best one we've ever had. You really captured the feelings we've been trying to get for years. Pat Josh on the back and headed home with Julia half asleep in his arms. Rocky got up and stretched. Well, great job, everyone. Let's get home and get some sleep. Now, the next one is called Farmers Day. It's not an actual event, I don't think. I don't remember. I'll have to look it up. But I think it's where they plan on doing an event for farmers because farmers who don't keep sheep haven't really been able to participate in anything. So they're going to get that going next. So that's it for today. I appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed this chapter as much as I did. I really enjoyed writing. I remember writing about the whiskey battle and laughing my butt off. So I will see you on Tuesday, which will be our next reading. What was it? What's the next one? Farmer's Day. So I look forward to seeing you. Hope you'll be here. And thank you very much for being here and listening in. So take it easy, be good, and be good to yourself. Bye.